Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode, we started working on creating a bow and arrow for our game. For now, we created the bow model, we can instantiate it, we can even shoot, but we don't have any arrows, so it's not going to be very effective. In this episode, we're going to create this arrow prefab, and this will allow us to deal damage, and we can hunt some bears. So we're going to open our prefabs, and inside we can find this arrow, and we're going to drag it into the scene. Now, as you can see, we need to rotate this and do some changes, but first we're going to unpack it so we don't affect the original one. And we're going to keep it named arrow, and then we're going to change all of these things. First of all, we're going to change the scale. Now again, you can always go over here into the model itself and change the scale factor. This will change the actual model of this arrow. If you do it over here, you change just this prefab and it's going to change all the things inside. So you can decide what you want to do, and sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't matter. We're just going to change this arrow to be 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, okay? So it will be a bit bigger. We are going to add a few things. We're going to add a rigid body because this should fly, this should have gravity. We're going to keep all of this as it is, but we're going to freeze the rotation. And we're going to change this to extrapolate. And we also want to change the collision detection to continuous because, for example, maybe you want it to be interactable with different walls or things like that, so you don't want it to just pass through these walls. So we're going to keep it this way. And then we're also going to add a box collider. Now we're going to make sure it's going to cover the actual arrow, so for now we're not going to touch it. And we're going to add a new script named Projectile or Arrow. Let's just name it Arrow. New script. And of course I'm going to provide a link to this script because it's rather long and I don't want to waste time on it. So now that we have all of this, we also want to change the actual model inside because this parent is not a model, but we have this arrowhead, we have the arrow stick, we have the arrowhead place. We're going to take the arrow stick and we're going to change it a bit. We want to change the rotation. We can see that the original rotation is 90 on the x-axis. So we're just going to make it 0 and it's going to be rotated this way. And again, you can see that it's going to point with the blue arrow, which is forward, okay? So make sure if you have another arrow, another model, just make sure that it points to the direction of the blue arrow. We're going to make all of this 0. And we also want to move it a bit backwards so it will not be in front of this center. We're going to do minus 0.5 or maybe 6 on the z-axis. Now we also have this arrowhead, which is still here. So we can do the same. We can do 0, 0, 0, and here minus 0.6, or we can just move it forward over here. Now it doesn't really matter because maybe you have your own arrow that is a full model. This is just because we have this thing over here. We also have this arrowhead place, but there's no use for it, so we're going to delete it. Now we're going to click on the arrow script, so double click on the arrow script, and we're going to open the link that I provided. So the link names the script projectile. Again, you can keep it at projectile, but you can also name it whatever you want. So just copy the content of this class up until the last bracket, copy, and paste it inside the class. And now you should not have any kind of error and everything is inside the arrow class. So we can save this and we're going to go over the script in a moment. But before we do this, let's just go back over here. Make sure that you have all of these components. And now that we changed the rotation of the model, let's also change the box collider. So let's just click over here and let's make it smaller. Let's adjust it so it will cover only the actual model. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. This is more important if you want the arrow to actually stick somewhere and you want to interact with it. If you just want to shoot the arrow and let it disappear, you don't have to worry about this. So just make sure it covers the entire model. And that's good enough, okay? Now we're going to drag it into our resources folder and make a prefab out of it. And we're going to delete it from the scene. Now, because it is named arrow, our bow is going to look for something named arrow inside of the resources folder, and this will allow us to instantiate it. So the arrow itself will also have some logic, right? Because the bow is simply shooting the arrow. It's going to instantiate the arrow and it's going to shoot the arrow. But the arrow itself will also have some logic. First of all, we want to destroy this object after a certain amount of seconds. If you want it to be destroyed very fast, you can set it to be 5 seconds. If you want these arrows to remain in the scene for a long time, you can increase it to something higher. You can even make it very high so it will stay there for a very long time. We're just going to keep it at 30 seconds. We have this arrow damage, but you can change the damage on the actual arrow over here. Right now it's private, but if you make it public, you can change your arrow. So maybe you can have like wooden arrows, metal arrows, and you can buy and craft different kind of arrows. So some arrows are weaker, some arrows are stronger. And then you can simply change the damage over here, or you can have a damage based on the bow. So the bow also will have this, where is it? This weapon damage script. I don't think it's a good idea because it doesn't make any sense that the bow itself has damage. Maybe it has some kind of quality or something like that. Maybe certain amount of bows can use certain arrows, but we're just going to remove it because it's not like the axe. The axe will have the damage on the axe itself. With the bow, we use arrows, so the arrows will have damage. So we can remove the script, even though we're not even using it. So on this arrow, we're going to have the damage. We're going to have a reference to the rigid body. We're going to destroy the object after 30 seconds. Then we also want to prevent collision with the actual player. Because if we rotate the body of the player and we shoot the arrow, sometimes weird things can happen. So we want to make sure that the player body and the player actual prefab will not collide with the arrow. And we can do this by using our player state singleton and get the player body and then get the collider. So we get the collider from the player, but we also get the collider from the body of the player. Right? Because we have the player itself, the main object, but we also have this cylinder, which is the player body. So first of all, let's rename this to body. Because over here, we look for a child named body. Or you can just say cylinder, but just make sure that it has the same name as this thing over here. And then it's going to take both of these colliders and we're going to tell to ignore the collision with both of these, okay? So now the arrow will not collide with the player body or the actual player object. Another thing we want to do is get the arrow to be stuck when it hits something. So for example, you want it to be stuck in a wall or in a tree. So we're doing this. Again, you don't have to use this. It's optional. But when we collide with something, we check if this collision, first of all, is not a player, right? So we don't want it to collide with the player. But if it's something else, then change the values of the rigid body, make it kinematic, and this will basically freeze the entire arrow. Another thing that we want to do is make sure our player has this tag, which it should have. We always had this tag, but we also want to make sure that the body itself has this tag, okay? because we want to prevent it to be stuck with the body. Even though we have this check over here and we don't want to collide with these objects, we still want to check it over here, okay? And now the arrow will be stuck if it hits a wall or if it hits a tree or something like that. Now, for the actual damage, we also want to do this if over here. If the collision is an animal, if it has this animal component, we're basically going to take this component and we're going to use the take damage method that we have inside the animal. And now we're going to provide the arrow damage. And again, you can provide it damage from a different source. Maybe you want to create some kind of global damage singleton that will have different damages for different weapons, and you can play around with this and simply provide it over here, or you can have it hard-coded in the arrow itself. Then it's going to hurt the animal, and eventually it will affect the animal the same way hitting it with an axe would. So at this point, it should deal damage to the animal. It should do all of these things. Now we still may need to play around with the positioning of the spawn point because maybe it's going to shoot it in a weird way, but let's see if everything is working. So now we can instantiate this bow, and if we try to shoot somewhere, let's see if we actually shoot to this middle point. So I'm going to right click, it's going to draw, and I'm going to left click, and we can see this arrow was shot over here. So sometimes it's not going to work. I think maybe we don't have a collider over here, so it just went through and then it went somewhere. But most of the time it is working. Now again, maybe the collider is a bit off of the actual mesh, so that's why we don't see it. Right, so maybe you need to play around with the collider of this house and then it's going to be stuck exactly on the wall. But the main idea is that now we can shoot our bear. You can play around with force of the bow, but even from here we should be able to hit the bear. And the bear is dead. And everything is working. Now at this point we have an unlimited amount of shots. We have no limitation to our arrows because over here we keep saying true. Now we want to add this limitation. So for this we can go to our inventory system, and this can work with any system. All you need to do is have some kind of method that will check if you have arrows inside of your inventory. And I don't remember if we have this method that checks for specific items. Maybe. Okay, so we have this method over here. I hope it will work, but this method basically takes a string and it checks the amount of items that we have inside of our inventory. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work because this is basically going to check the amount of separate items in our inventory. But remember that we changed our inventory system to have stacks, so each item can have a bunch of items inside of it. We also have this thing over here, check if stack exists, and it basically takes the name of the stack and it returns an inventory slot, and then we can check the amount of items. Okay, so we can use this. Let's check if we even use this. Yes, we use this when we want to add something, but it's weird that we're not using this for the crafting system. Later, we're going to return to the crafting system a bit and just make sure that everything is still working, because we changed the inventory system a bit and we just want to make sure that everything is working. So we're going to use this method, check if stack exists, and we're going to check for the amount of arrows. So inside the bow controller, we're going to do this. if, let's do something like this. Int arrow count inventory system instance check stack. How is it named? Check if stack exists. Oh, why is it private? Yeah, let's make it public. Check if stack exists, and we're going to provide it with the name arrow. Obviously, it's going to return us a inventory slot. And then we can simply take this and we can say int arrow count arrows amount. Should have an amount here, right? Amount, and inside item and slot, right? We need the item and slot, amount and inventory. Nice. I hope it will work, because the idea is that it's going to find a stack named arrows, and then we're going to get the amount in this stack. So if this stack is gone, it's just going to find another stack. I hope it's not going to give us any errors. But now we can know the arrow count, and we can say if arrow count is bigger than 0, then allow the shooting. Now, we also want to remove the arrows. For this, we have our inventory system instance remove item. And with the remove item, I remember that we did change it to work with the stackable system. Yes, item and slot. So this should work. And we're going to basically use this. We need to provide the item name and the amount to remove. So the name is arrow, and amount to remove will be 1 because we shoot 1 arrow each time. Now you don't have to hard code this. Maybe you can just use this. Arrow item name. Okay. And this will remove 1 from the inventory. So let's save this and see if it works. Again, I'm improvising a bit, so maybe we're going to have to fix a few things. But now we also need to create an actual inventory item for the arrows. So inside of our resources, we have something like, let's say, some seeds, right? We have these seeds. Seed. Tomato seed. We're going to duplicate the tomato seed. We're going to rename it to arrow. And inside again, we're going to change this to arrow. We're going to make it not trashable, but not equipable, not selectable, not usable. Amount in inventory 1, selling price, let's say 7. Maybe trashable, it doesn't matter, but we just want to make sure it's an arrow. It doesn't have any special functionality. It's just going to be used by the bow. And let's add some kind of image. We have the one that looked like an arrow. And now we are going to be able to craft these arrows again in the crafting system. We are going to maybe buy them from our shop. And then let's just do this. I don't remember how. Buy system. Oh yeah, so let's do this over here. We can buy another element for, and we're going to drag our arrow. Where's the arrow? Where's the arrow? Oh yeah, it's not going to allow me, because we already have this arrow over here. So let's rename this to arrow model. Let's rename this to arrow. But now that we changed this to arrow model, we also need to change it on our bow. So let's go to our bow. It was in the same place. And let's rename this prefab path to arrow model. And now it's going to find the model. And for the inventory item, it's going to be arrow. And we're going to add this to the buy system. And we're going to sell it for 10, something like that. Or even 2. And now let's see if it's working. Now at this point, we don't have arrows inside of our inventory. So if we try to shoot the bow, what is this? Bow controller. Yes, it's probably not going to find this. So obviously we need to do a null check over here. If arrows exist, so if it found something, then we're going to use this arrow count. We can also say that the arrow count is 0. And then we're going to set it to be the arrow count. Okay. So just add this if over here. And now if we equip our bow, we're going to try to shoot. Oh yes, it's not going to even allow us to shoot because we don't have any bows. So even if we try, it's not going to allow us to even use this animation. So you may change the logic, right? Maybe you do want to draw the bow without actually having a bow, although it doesn't make any sense. But maybe you can add this thing over here. So let's do this. Let's allow to handle this thing over here. Let's allow this, okay? And then inside we're going to do this check. So let's take all of this. And only when we actually want to shoot, we're going to check this. And we're going to use the arrow count over here. And if, or we can add it over here. Else, no arrows in the inventory. And we should also set it to be false. And maybe we also want to set the animation to false. So I'm just checking it out. Maybe we're going to have some errors. But the idea is that even if we don't have arrows, we still want to draw the bow to run this animation. Okay, so we can draw the bow, we can release, but if we draw and we try to shoot, it will tell us that we don't have any arrows inside the inventory. So now we want to buy some arrows. We're going to approach our shop. We're going to buy some arrows. Where's our money? Why we don't see our money? Oh yeah, we have the coins. And now we have some arrows. We can go back. And now we should be able to shoot. Let's see, we have 9 arrows. So I guess it did not work. It did not find any arrows. So it looked for an arrow, it did not find an arrow. Item in slot, amount in inventory. Let's debug a bit. Let's take all of this inside of this if. So only if we actually draw and we try to shoot, it will do this calculation, and it will not do it every frame, right? It makes more sense. So let's see what is the problem. Maybe it's not finding it the correct way. Okay, no arrows. Let's buy some arrows. So now we have 6, 7. Oh, it's actually working. So I guess the problem was that this thing over here was outside of the if, and then we did not even do it. So we should place it, all of this, inside of this if. We don't even need this debug log anymore, but now it's working. And now we shot how many arrows? 1 or 2? 1 arrow. Anyway, we can see that we have 1, 3, 1. Let's shoot another one. And now 1 was destroyed. We have 4 left. A nice shot. 2 left. No, missed. 1 left. And now we shouldn't be able to shoot. Yeah, we don't have any more arrows. And now all of this is working. So we are checking for arrows. We are removing arrows from our inventory. And now we are limited to the amount of shots we can take. And that's it. You can basically play around. Let me show you. I always tell you that you can do stuff, but I don't show you examples. For example, if you want to have different kinds of arrows. For this, it's going to be maybe a bit tricky. I mean, it's not tricky, but because our bow is looking for a specific model, it's going to basically rely on the name of the model and not on the type of the model. So if we try to create other models, for example, as I told you, wooden arrows, we're going to have to provide the exact name over here. Now, we don't have to do this because this will look for... Oh yes, of course. Also here, make sure you rename this to model. Otherwise, when you reset this, it's going to get removed. So make sure this is also model. Now it's going to look for this, and we use this over here. So yes, we can do this, but you know what? It sounds cool. It sounds like something fun to do. So in the next episode, instead of continuing with other things, we're going to implement this, okay? So we're going to have some kind of UI, and it will allow us to choose a different arrow. We're also going to craft the bow. So we're going to, maybe I'm going to show you how we can craft the bow, although you should already know how to do this, but we're going to add this into our crafting system. So we're going to spend the next episode doing all of this, and we're going to have a much nicer shooting system with different arrows, different ammunition. In the future, you can add more kinds of arrows. You can add like maybe diamond arrows or go wild, okay? So this is what we're going to do in the next episode, and this is just a spontaneous idea that I got right now. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not a subscriber. You can also leave a like, become a member of the channel. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. And I'll see you next time.